I've always known about Star Trek, but I never actually got into it until my husband introduced me to it. After allowing me to fly through The Next Generation by skipping quite a few episodes and only focusing on the main arc, I found myself in love with the world, with the characters, and the grand element genre, sci-fi. There are not a lot of good movies or TV shows nowadays that capture the element of sci-fi without royally messing it up or mixing it with other genres. But Star Trek scratched that itch for me. I absolutely loved Jean-Luc Picard. I was enamored with Patrick Stewart, the man who always looked the age he is now. But even still, I haven't gone back and watched over The Next Generation, and I conveniently forgot that there are a lot more details to the story that exist within the majority of the show that I happened to miss because I was not watching the episodes that didn't directly tie in with the storyline. And watching Picard, specifically season 3 of Star Trek Picard, made me want to go back and explore that. I don't know what happened this season, but it is very clear that they definitely had different writers than they did for the first 2 seasons of Star Trek Picard. Of course, anytime he was on screen, Picard, I keep calling him Picard because I know him as Picard, but Jean-Luc, sorry. See what I mean? Patrick Stewart always gave a very believable performance. I enjoyed watching him on screen. You could tell he is a great actor. Even though a lot of the script was lacking at times, Patrick Stewart always brought us back to the experience and the sensation of Star Trek. Dare I say it, in the first 2 seasons, he is the only thing that grounded the feeling and the reminder that this was Star Trek. Without him, it would feel like a shadow of its former self. There were a lot of things that went over my head, like when they introduced 7 of 8, 8 of 9, wait, 9 of 10.
Take a breath.
I actually had to watch this with my husband because he is a huge Star Trek fan and he knew all the references. I didn't know of any of the references, even though I had seen Star Trek Next Generation. I still hadn't seen the majority of it. So mind you, a lot of these elements were still very new to me. But this wasn't necessarily a bad thing, as it allowed me to be the middleman to connect the old with the new. Being a new fan, being able to judge the show as a standalone show, while also understanding some of the bare minimum references so I can appreciate them. But yet, through the direction, even though it wasn't horrible, there were a lot of instances in the first 2 seasons where it didn't feel exactly like Star Trek, and that there was something missing. At most, I can say that Picard was just mediocre. It was fun at times, but it was just mediocre, and there was a lot of walking around and talking, for which I stayed only because of the presence of Patrick Stewart. And maybe because of the mediocrity of the script, these seasons didn't really stand out as memorable to me. Then welcome season 3, that feels more like Star Trek than any of the seasons that came before it. In both the franchise name Star Trek and the icon subtitle Picard, let's face it, he is the face of Star Trek, this show actually felt as though it begun in this season. The other 2 seasons, for me personally, feel as though they no longer exist, and that they were just rough drafts for this beautiful classic, heavenly masterpiece that is season 3. It's like they went back to the drawing board and hired a completely new director, completely new writers, simplified the story, while also making it more engaging, and oh boy, do they do villains so well. There is so much to talk about with this. Never at all in the first 2 seasons of Picard did I feel as though I was just itching to see the next episode. It was good at times, but they definitely weren't good throughout the entirety of their runtime. Star Trek Picard Season 3 changed my mind. One of the things I absolutely loved about this is how they introduced a new element. Not just bringing back old characters, but bringing to the forefront new characters and a legacy. And you know where I'm going with this. Picard has a son.
Oh, yeah!
Crusher to be exact. I really enjoy the element of seeing him bond with his son and not knowing how to bond with his son. His son not being completely open to his father. How they tie back in present situations with the past. How they have conversations. For example, the very realistic conversation that Picard ends up having with his old flame Beverly felt very realistic. And at the end of episode 2, when it's finally revealed, when it's being teased the entire time by Riker alluding to it, a truth I already knew was coming because the way they were playing it up, it felt like a massive payoff. In a way that most shows today seem unable to give us.
You are going to get us all killed. Why are you doing this?
Because he's my son.
Oh my god. This is a type of show I didn't realize I needed. And as much as it pains me to say this, while I know this is the last season and a lot of people are upset that it's the last season, I'm also glad that it's the last season. Because I would rather a show end on a strong note than to fizzle out and die in a pathetic way.
No, Your Grace.
There's so much underlying story, so much mystery, but all of it is directed and melts together so well that there's not a moment when you're not wondering what's going on. I was hooked from the beginning of the season. Even a brand new character that was introduced, I already fell in love with before they killed off that character. And they made me feel more for this character that was just introduced than I felt for any of the characters in the previous seasons. I never really cared about any of the characters in the previous seasons. And dare I say it, I don't really even think or consider Star Trek Picard Season 3 to be a continuation of the first 2 seasons. There's still some elements of the story there that might tie in, but like I said, this outshines them by a mile. And it feels like a total retcon, and a welcome one at that. This is what Star Trek Picard should have been. This is in spirit, and all of its trueness. Star Trek. The conversations of philosophy that they have, they do so in the very small, intimate settings of their relationships. I enjoyed seeing Riker and Picard having actual tension between them. They felt a lot more human in this. And where I probably didn't have as much appreciation for characters that have returned, ones that I feel are introduced to me for the first time, even if I've seen them in Next Generation, this season definitely made me have an appreciation for them now. All I'm left feeling is, I want to know more. Seriously, whatever these writers are being paid, they need to double it. That is if they haven't already. That's my main overview of Star Trek Picard Season 3. At the time of this video, I've only watched it to episode 5, but everything that they've done thus far is a step in every right direction they could take. And more shows could learn from this. Thanks so much for watching. This has been Ultiori. You ask, we answer.